Hey, welcome back. This is Wisconsin Shoe Guy, and today we're going to do a shoe battle between two very cool Adelaides. We're going to do the Carmina Adelaide on the Simpson last and the Alfred Sargent more. Let's get started.
Welcome back to my YouTube channel. This is Wisconsin Shoe Guy, and our channel we talk about men's dress wear. It's all about footwear, and we talk about unboxing videos, general shoe knowledge, helping you understand the industry and what's happening with your shoes. We look at shoes critically to determine whether or not they're worth the price that they charge. We compare shoe to shoe to understand which one is the best of the same category, and then I interview experts in the field to get their take as well. Check out my playlists to see all my videos. Welcome back. This is Wisconsin Shoe Guy, and today we're going to look at the Alfred Sargent Adelaide and talk a little bit about how it compares to some others. I'm going to actually break this into different videos as I do it, but I'm going to be doing them in a row. One of my watchers actually suggested that I have a categorization where I look at the last and I look at some of the structural things like the sole and things like that separately. Then I look at the quantitative measurements. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to do that for each of these. So I'm just going to repeat this piece in each of the videos as I compare this shoe to several others. So with that said, here we go. So the Alfred Sargent Moore is an Adelaide. It is a cap toe Adelaide. So Adelaides can come with a cap toe or it can come with a medallion toe. I've never seen them with a plain toe, but I'm sure that that's possible as well. They have heel counters usually, although that is also an option. So like there's an Edmonds Adelaide called the Cornwallis that does not have heel counters, and actually has a medallion, right? But no cap. So there's a lot of different options that you can do. As we look at this particular one, we are going to look at the last first. Now the last is a very important part of the shoe, right? It is the overall shape and is going to give you the overall impression of the shoe when it's on the ground. This is especially important for hole cuts because hole cuts have very little adornment, right? They're just a plain piece of leather. And so the last is going to be what overall is the shape of the shoe. Well, that is true on a cap toe Oxford as well. The cap toe Oxford has a cap, but the vamp here really gets its structure and shape from the last. And so you can have a hole cut shoe or a cap toe Oxford shoe that can look like a clog, or you can have one that looks like a very sleek piece of footwear. So it's important to note. So as we look at the last here, this is a good sweeping last. It has a nice line as it comes back toward the heel. Okay, so the way that it gradually goes back is really good. It has plenty of room here for your foot. So I have a relatively wide foot, and I actually sized down for this in order to be able to get it. So the ball is a little bit on the tight side, but the rest of the shoe, the volume at the front is really, really good for my foot. A little bit of pinching here on my pinky toe, which I may have to put a shoe stretcher in order to accommodate, but so far so good. The heel is nice and tight, so you get that nice splush when you put your foot in. You know, use a shoehorn, right? Everybody says that. I don't always, but what I do is I hold the back of it as I pull it onto my foot. And I do like to have the splush to make sure that my heel is secure, because nothing is worse than having the heel slide on your foot. If that happens, then you get blisters, and that sucks. So, anyway, the other thing that I really like about lasts is the way the toe is like a chisel, right? So this has this part here, it narrows, and then it has a relatively flat part here. Now it's not a square. Sometimes they'll call this a soft square. And there is a lot of variety when it comes to this in shoes. So as you look at this series of videos with the Alfred Sargent compared to the other one, you'll see that there are some that are more rounded than others and some that are quite sharp. Now that is also true here where it rises on the sides. So that can be a really big change in the shoe. So as the last goes, right, you have the way the toe is, you have the sides, Okay? And then you have the shape here, the sweeping part. Okay? And then of course you have the heel and how well that fits to your foot. Okay? Now, some shoes are going to have a high instep last and some are going to have a low instep last. What does that mean? It means that the amount of leather here can vary. A lot of times what people want is they want a shoe that has very little in the way of a V-gap, okay, where this part just comes together very, very closely. And that can look really good, but a V-gap doesn't mean that the shoe doesn't fit you well. Sometimes if you have no V-gap up here, the shoe can be much too big. So it's a real catch-22, right? I prefer to have it with very little V-gap, but at the same time, if there's no V-gap and they come together, that's sometimes a sign that the shoe is too big. So something to keep in mind as you're looking at sizing and trying to keep it in. Now, the other piece, of course, is that leather does stretch, so you could have a V-gap on day one. I have a pair of CNES Adelaides that when I first got them, the V-gap was about 1.5 inches, and now it's down to almost 0. So again, it depends on the quality of the leather and how much they'll stretch. The higher end shoes stretch less, but they still stretch. It's leather, right? So something to consider. So anyway, so that's the last. So let's look at the sole. This is part of the Alfred Sargent exclusive range and has a really nice sole. It has a beveled waist, has a blind stitch sole. Now, this is also made with an oak bark tanned sole. So the leather is very, very long lasting. I have another pair of these that I've had for about a year and the wear is about the same as this. So it just wears off the ink that you do when you wear it the first couple times, and then it will just last and last and last and last. This is now, like if you look at a JR sole, that's a double oak bark tanned, and that will last longer, but this is also much better than some of your chrome tan soles or something like that is available on some other shoes. Now, how long should a sole last? This is a really, really hard question to answer because soles are really dependent on the way you walk. It's your the surface that you're walking on. It's your weight, the way you walk. Sometimes people have they walk like this. Okay, and so you can wear down the sole here, and it doesn't really matter where you wear the sole down first. Once the sole is worn down in one particular area, it's time to replace it. You can't replace part of the sole. I know some people have done things where they replace only the front half and so forth, and you can do that, and it saves some money, but it really doesn't lengthen the length of the sole because you do want to make sure that you're using the same stitch holes on the welt. Otherwise you have to replace the welt, and when you replace the welt, that actually diminishes the life of the sole a lot, which is another reason that a lot of people prefer to go to a cobbler instead of sending their shoes to the factory, because the factories have to put so many shoes through the rotation that they'll actually remove the welts and put new welts on because it's actually faster for them. So something to consider. So like when I used to send my shoes to Alden Edmonds to have them recrafted, and it's a fine practice, right? But the shoes can only be recrafted 3 times, and then after that, and I've actually had it where on the second time they were too tight, and it was because the new welt went on and it was just a little bit tighter. So food for thought. But anyway, this is the Alfred Sargent. That is the last. That is the sole. You can see the heel here has this beautiful split here with a lot of leather and a little bit of rubber. That actually helps it wear down slower, which is all about extending the life of the shoe. So that is the Alfred Sargent. So let's take a look at the Carmina. This is a very different shoe. This is actually a Carmina Adelaide on the Simpson last. And I chose to have it on this last because I wanted to try out something a little bit narrower. Sometimes you'll see Adelaides on the Rain last, which is more common out on their website. Now, what I like about this particular one is this is not a chisel, as much of a chisel last. It's not really round. It's not really a chisel. It's kind of more of what I would guess to be, I guess they would call this a soft chisel, but I would even call it less so. It does have a very cool angle going this way though. All right, and that I think is something that you'll see on a lot of the higher end shoes and something that I like. It also has a little bit of a bump here, although relatively difficult to see, right? It does have the sweeping area here. Now the structure of the sweep on this part of the shoe is a lot less than it is on the Alfred Sargent, and that is because the leather is different. I chose to have a tumbled leather on the vamp of the Carminas, and that tumbled leather does not have the same structure as the other, so it's a little bit looser. You can even see here it just has a little bit of looser feel to it. So that's part of it. Now it looks really nice, and it has a very difference in big texture component that it adds to it. This is what they call llama calf, and I've been very, very clear with them to be sure about this, and this is just calf skin that is embossed in a print that resembles llama, but it has nothing to do with the actual animal. But it is a very cool differential in the shoes, and this is chestnut versus tan. And it's a nice difference, because sometimes you want shoes that have a little bit of a difference to them, just to provide additional texture to the outfit, right? Now you don't want to overdo it, and you don't want to wear it, you know, with a very, very textured outfit and a very, very textured shoe, but it's it can add a lot to it. So I like having some texture is available in the wardrobe. Now one of the things about Carmina is that they are one of the places where it's easy to get a JR sole. And they do blind stitch the JR soles, which is great. Now these are the double oak bark tan soles, so this is a double oak bark tan sole, and this is an oak bark tan sole. They feel very, very similar, if not the same. You can see that the way that they wear down, the ink and everything is pretty much the same. So it's a very, very close thing. Now you can see on the heels, while the heel shape is the same, the heel is a little bit smaller on the Alfred Sargent. The heel also has 4 nails versus this one has maybe, 5, 8, 10 nails in this. And that is the difference. The actual size of the rubber insert is about the same on both of them, if not a little bit larger on the Carmina, but not remarkably so. The Carmina also has nails at the toe, to prevent premature wear. The Alfred Sargent does not. Now, I tend to think that Alfred Sargent doesn't do this because most of the major shoe aficionados are going to have a toe plate put in there. And I may. I have so many shoes. For me to go and just put toe plates in is a massive expense. So it's not the kind of thing I'm going to do willy-nilly. But with certain shoes, and this may be one of them, it is something that I will add aftermarket. For some, I have actually intentionally decided not to do them, just to kind of see how the same sole wears with toe plate and without. So that's, but that's more of something that I would probably do for my channel than I would do just as a wearer, right? So you can see that the last here has that additional structure. The chisel portion on the top of the last is very different, right? From a sole perspective, they look about the same, but when you actually look at the shoes themselves, the way the shape of the toe is very much more almond shaped on the Carmina than it is on the Carlos Santos. So that is a material difference in my book. The other big material difference is the way that they structure the actual U-throat. If you look at the Alfred Sargent, the U-throat is very much a straight U, and the U actually goes to the very much at the top of the top line right here. Okay. Now, when you look at the Carmina, they do it a little different. They actually round out the U-throat, and it goes to the top line back here. And you have this additional part here that's in the facing. Now, this is really important now because I have different materials on the two pieces of the shoe. But even so, it does have a material look difference in the way that the shoe comes across. So some people are going to argue that this is going to have a more elegant sweep to it. I'm going to say that I like the way that the other one comes up and narrows your focus to the top of the shoe better here. Now, if your pants cover this, it really makes no difference at all. From a symmetrical side, these are both symmetrical shoes, so there's no asymmetry in either of them. So that's something to consider there. And that is the Carmina. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at some of the finishing on these shoes. So we're going to start with the Alfred Sargent. And I think that the Alfred Sargent has a good amount of finishing, but some of it is left intentionally plain. And so that's going to be part of what we're looking at today, is what is left intentionally plain, and what is not. So we're going to start with the pinking, right? And the pinking is the area along the cap, along the edge, along the top line. And I'm going to say that this pinking is relatively fine. I do find it helpful to actually measure the pinking, because sometimes that can help determine whether it's actually finer or not. And this is looking at like 3mm pinking, and it is consistent across the whole shoe. When it comes to fudging, and fudging is along the edge here on the top of the welt, when they take that wheel and they put in that really nice pattern, there is no fudging on the Alfred Sargent at all, not even on the inside. So it's just, it's relatively straightforward. Now the sole edge itself, which is right here, okay, this has been finished. So it has a ridge at the top and it has a ridge at the bottom, okay, and you can feel that. And then when it comes to actually by the waist where it's beveled, the sole has like a rounded edge along the edge there. So it's rounded here or beveled, okay, and then it's ironed with the groove at the top and the bottom all the way around here. So it's like a 180 iron, and then the rest of that 270 is got that bevel shape to it. Now the heel itself, somebody used a wheel and artistically did a little finishing piece on the edge there as well. As I stated earlier, the heel cap or the heel counter is actually in two pieces with a seam down the middle. There is stitching on either side of that seam instead of just having a plain seam, and of course there's the flap over the top as well, which is pretty common on these. The counter actually extends beyond the heel. These heels, as I said before, are actually really short, and usually they that centimeter where it is short is normally taken up by the heel actually going out there. So that's an interesting detail there. I think they wanted to make room for the bevel. That's just my opinion, but again, I'm not a shoemaker. I have no idea in terms of why they would do that, so that's just my assumption in looking at it. And of course, we said on the sole before, the sole is beautiful, has all this, you know, it has the bevel waist, and it has this, you know, blind stitch on there as well. When we look at extras, you know, there isn't a lot of hand stitching. When it comes to the skiving, and what skiving is when you put a toe cap on, and you know they don't actually have the leather going all the way underneath, so the cap doesn't go over it. They're actually joining two pieces of leather here. What they do is they thin the leather so that this gap from the cap to the vamp is as thin as possible. And I'm going to say that they did not skive this extremely thin. When I look at some of my other shoes, which I'll look at in my in the different battles here, I know that is actually thinner. Now, in terms of actually measuring it, I can't tell whether that's actually a whole millimeter of thickness or not. I will tell you that it's thicker than my tape. Okay, so I'm gonna say it's more than a millimeter, and I'm gonna use that as my judge, right? Is it thicker than the tape? Can I still feel the tape when I put the tape on top of it? And in this case, I do. So that's gonna say I'm gonna say that those edges are on the thick side on the Alfred Sargent. In terms of other pieces, that's the last things we're going to measure are the density of the stitches. Okay, and this is just a very, very straightforward measurement. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 4.5. 4.5 stitches per centimeter across the top here. I always measure at the cap toe on Adelaide's because it's always the same. And then when it comes to the sole, this is normally 3. For the sole, it is, I'm going to say 3.5, almost 4. Almost 4 stitches per centimeter on the sole. So that is the Alfred Sargent. So, welcome back. What we're going to do now is we're going to look at this Carmina and the finishing on it. If we look at the pinking, there is a pretty large pinking on this. It's probably 3 millimeters on it. The fudging on it is really, really good on the edge, and it has fudging really all the way down to like here. So from it's not quite 270, maybe it's like 230, because it doesn't have any on the waist, and that's really just because they couldn't get the fudging wheel in here, which makes sense. It is wider here, and then as it goes on the top, it's not quite as wide. And what's interesting is it doesn't actually go over the stitches. So sometimes the fudging actually covers the stitches completely and you can't even see them. Whereas here it goes right up to the stitch, but it doesn't go over them. So now what that also means is that it doesn't make it more difficult to see the stitches. It also kind of looks like it's only on the edge, and kind of looks like the stitches are over the pinking, which is not a good look in my opinion. So that is something that I would say that I would take points away from for Carmina. Now from an edge perspective, they have this beautiful ironwork with the top and bottom ledge all the way around to here, and then here they bevel it. Probably for the same reason. It's just hard to get into the machine there without hurting the upper. And as you look at the waist, it is they did my initials here, but it's a narrow waist, and it has relatively nothing fancy, no bevel, no fiddleback or anything like that. From a pure extra piece, you know, they did a little bit on the clicking here in order to put this as one piece instead of two, but they do have the seam, which you won't see on others. The design on this doesn't require any special talent in clicking as far as I know on the top. If I look at the skiving and how thin it is perfectly smooth when I compare the joint here. Well, not perfectly smooth, but it's a lot smoother than it is on the Alfred Sargent. So when I put my hand on the Alfred Sargent here, it's almost not different than feeling the with absolutely no tape there at all. So it doesn't, you know, this is much thicker of a ledge than it is on the Carmina, and the edge on the Carmina is the same everywhere. So that means that they spent more time skiving the connections on the leather to make it as smooth as possible. So from a finishing aspect, I think that that's important. By the way, the pinking on this goes all the way around on the top line as well. So some shoes, it actually is not on the top line, which is only important if the shoe's so tight that you can feel the pinking, which you shouldn't. So I'm not overly concerned about that, and I don't think that the style points are that important to me anyway. From a what do I want to call it? The left and the right side of the shoe are symmetrical, so this is not an asymmetrical shoe at all. So very similar to the Alfred Sargent in that respect. If we go to the upper stitch density and we look at this, we're at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which is pretty standard. And as we look at the sole, we are 1, 2, 3, which is also standard. So everything meets the standards, right? It's good. It's well put together. You know, they're combining different kinds of leather, which is harder. The sole is a JR sole. It's a solid piece. So pretty well done. They do have the heel, the bevel here. It's actually a little bit longer. I think Carmina uses a different tool than everybody else because the edge is bigger. But it is the same. So overall, a very nice shoe.
In conclusion, Carmina versus Alfred Sargent. Now, here's an interesting thing. Carmina is less expensive, right? They're looking at $529 versus $690. I would say that the Carmina has now, if you're looking at a custom Carmina like these, there is a 30% upcharge. So now you're talking about $690. So it's about the same, right? I think that on this last with the Carmina, I like the last on the Alfred Sargents just a little bit better. The Simpson last is really nice. It's got a very sleek look to it. I love the rise right here on the Simpson, the way that looks. I really find that to be just a great shoe, and there's just so much depth in this shoe that I like. I like the heels better. I like the metrics around it with the stitch density are really good. The finishing on the sole is really good. Of course, these are JR soles, so they're already upgraded. I like the nails. That's a really nice touch as well. So I like it. Okay. I find that the leather quality on the Alfred Sargent seems just a little bit higher, and I can't really explain why. This is tumbled leather, so of course it's not going to be quite as good. But even on the vitello, which is the smooth parts of this, I just don't see the natural variation in the leather to the degree that I see it on the Alfred Sargent. So maybe that has something to do with something else, but I'm going to say that I like the leather on this one better. So if you're looking at a custom Carmina versus this, I'm going to say go with the Alfred Sargent all day long. If you're looking at a stock Carmina, okay, and it is, you know, $120 less, I would go with the Carmina. I feel like it's just not substantially different enough to justify that difference in price.